Coming up on KRUZ Radio and Company, Danny SACHS with another tale from the Johnny Kidd Files. Please stay tuned, won't you?
Around 4:30 in the morning, Rick Donahue rolled up to my shop with his custom-built Harley. He worked for me part-time. His bike was painted in ivory white with dark green scallops. Man, that was a bitchin'-looking bike. Anyway, when Rick pulled up, he unlocked the door and rolled his bike inside. Then he sat in my office chair and waited for the storm to pass. It was raining pretty hard that night. He turned on the radio and thumbed through my desk drawer. I don't know what he was looking for, if anything. I never got a chance to ask him. I didn't get to the shop until about 10 that morning. But as Rick sat there going through my stuff, Kaiser and his brother Jeff, a couple of Clifford's guys, had been watching for him from the mall parking lot across the way. When they saw the light come on, they quickly came around and entered from the front door. Rick stood up real fast with his hands on the desk and asked them, "What are you guys doing here?" Kyle ran his hand over the tank of the bike, stopped for a second to admire the paint job, and then he walked toward Rick. "Nice bike," he said. Then he asked him, "Where's the money?" Kyle knew Rick couldn't afford a bike like that, not without a bankroll. Rick took a step toward the door. He didn't want to get cornered in the office, but he didn't move fast enough. When Kyle and Jeff got closer, Rick sat back down in my chair with a guilty look on his face and said that he didn't have it. And then he told them that he wasn't the one who hit the Y&I yard. Now, the Y&I yard was a wrecking yard that was also a holding facility for hot cars. Clifford Garcia ran the operation. Kyle and Jeff were his goons. Kyle asked Rick how did he even know that they were talking about the Y&I yard. Then he told them that they knew it was him, Rick, who took a couple cars off the lot and $25,000 that Clifford kept in a floor safe. Only 3 people had access to the keys, and Kyle reminded Rick, "Clifford, me," meaning him, "and you," he said. Rick tried to reason with him and said, "Look, I only pick up what you tell me to pick up at Clifford's, then bring it here for Johnny, that's me, to do his thing, cut him up, you know. I had nothing to do with it. Where would I stash 3 frickin' cars anyway?" Rick kept talking. "Take a look around, they're not here, are they?" Just then, Jeff pulled Rick out of the office and into the shop area. "You really disappoint me, man," Kyle said. "Who told you that there were exactly 3 cars?" Rick said again that he didn't take any money or cars off the Y&I lot. Not without a say-so, anyway. Jeff grabbed Rick's arms and held him from the back. Kyle socked him once in the stomach, and then they continued to rough him up. When Rick hit the floor, he said, "What are you gonna do? Kill me over something I didn't do? Fuck you guys." By then, Kyle was done with Rick. He just shook his head and said that they weren't gonna kill him just then, and that it was just a warning. They were gonna give him a few hours to think about it. The cars really didn't mean anything. It was the money. Clifford wants it back, all of it. The keys too, he said. As Rick tried to get back on his feet, he said, "What do you mean? They took the keys from the safe too?" Kyle didn't say anything back. He looked up at a long steel beam that ran across the roof. It held a hoist on a trolley system that I used to pull engines. "Hang him up there," Kyle told his brother. Jeff pulled Rick back up. Rick struggled a bit, but he was easily overpowered by Jeff. Kyle grabbed a heavy chain that I had hanging on the wall, and they wrapped Rick once around with it, pinning his arms to his side. Then they hooked him to the pulley and hoisted him about a foot off the ground. Kyle then took a 5-gallon bucket from under my workbench and slid it under Rick's feet so he wouldn't be completely dangling free. Rick was beat up pretty bad, but he was still able to think straight. "Come on, man. Come on, you can't leave me here like this. Even if I had Clifford's money, how the hell can I get it to you 2 assholes now if I'm stuck up here like this?" Rick said. Kyle responded, Rick, Johnny comes in at what time, 10 or so? It's 5:30 now. That gives you 5 hours to think about it. Get some rest, pal. You're gonna need it." Kyle then turned to his brother and said, "We go." And they left Rick hanging there. 6:30 a.m. Sonny drove to my shop. She had my coupe, and she was high on coke. And she was packing one of those stick road flares. When she saw the light coming from the office, she thought Stephanie was inside. Turns out it was Sonny who was making those strange calls to the shop every morning, checking up on me. When she heard that I was with Stephanie, it set her off in a jealous rage. Maybe it was just an excuse to get high. I'll never really know. But on that stormy morning, she parked my coupe on the side and walked around back, lit the flare and tossed it through the barred window. Rick saw the flare roll across the carpet and shouted, "Hey, I'm in here, help!" Sonny couldn't hear Rick over the thunder. She had been dead set on torching the shop with her without Stephanie in it anyway. As she got back into the coop, she ran another line of blow on her compact. While savoring the drip, she watched the orange glow from the shop window for a minute, then turned the key, and then she drove off. Meanwhile, Rick tried desperately to free himself, but in his frantic attempt, he accidentally wobbled a bucket that Kyle put under his feet into a can of lacquer thinner, which splattered across the floor, sending the flames further into the shop. Just when Rick thought he was toast, the flames were quickly extinguished. "Wow, I thought I was a goner, man," he said in a sigh of relief. "Thanks, man. Hey, help me down, will you?" Just then, a large set of keys fell out of Rick's pocket. A second later, Rick took 2 bullets to the head. He was a goner, all right. By the time I got to the shop that morning, it was torched, and the cops were everywhere, and Rick's body was hanging in the middle of the bay.
This has been a 2-Bit Tales production.